Hi, my name is Brittany Eichhoff, and today we will be talking about how SES and ACEs affect our students. So I'm going to start by just kind of telling you a little bit about my experience when I was in school. So I was middle class parents, and my dad told me I'm not allowed to work. So the rule was I could only get a job during school if I could keep 8 straight A's. Well, to keep straight A's, you have to get them first. So I would never had a job growing up in high school time. And that shaped part of my socioeconomic status. Because while students around me had jobs, had money, and were able to go out about and do things, I never had that privilege. So I also was on reduced lunching. So I was in a lower socioeconomic status to the point that the school did help my parents feed me. However, when you would see my house, I would look pretty wealthy because we had a pretty nice big house. However, our house was nice and big for the fact that my father had personally done renovations to our house. So he built a deck, he built a bedroom, he built a fireplace. And this is all because my father is a construction worker. So he was able to do those renovations onto our home to make it fit the lifestyle that we craved and that we wanted, even though we didn't necessarily have the funds to buy a house like the house we currently own. So the first thing I just want to kind of mention with all of this is that your socioeconomic status is not going to fully reflect your lifestyle. And some students who seem well off may not be as financially set as you would assume, and that can also be the adverse. Some students may be more financially set than they seem because they could be working multiple jobs, they could have a form of income that is not visible to their lifestyle. And so that just makes all of the socioeconomic stuff kind of fishy and kind of mixed up in a way that a teacher should never judge a student by what they presume their financial situation is and what their lifestyle is at home, because someone could seem wonderful, but they could still have some of these issues in their ACEs going on that you're not aware of, and that you would never know about. So always take anything with students with a grain of salt until you know the personal student's life story, because you can't look at your students like statistics. So, on to the actual education part. So this TED Talk is about the effects of socioeconomic status and how those affect students. We'll be discussing their ACEs, which are adverse childhood experiences, and the effect that they have on our students. We'll be talking about who ACEs affect and what that effect has on students, especially students of lower socioeconomic status, and just how those two combined can be such a detrimental effect on our students. So let's start with some numbers, because numbers are fun. So according to lexialearning.com, a article called A Brain-Based Approach to Helping Low SES Students, 21% of students are living in poverty in the United States, which is one of the highest rates of childhood poverty in the developed countries, in the developed world. Children that grow up in poverty complete less schooling than their wealthier peers, according to the American Psychological Association. So that means students from a lower SES are more likely to drop out and are more likely to just not finish school, which I guess is what dropping out means, but just to not finish. And so that's not good, because we want students of a lower SES to be able to graduate, to be able to get degrees, because that makes it where they have more jobs that are opened up to them and that are available to them. And we want students to be able to thrive and to succeed. And so we want to be able to reach out to our students so that way we can help them. So, let's also talk about our ACEs. So ACEs, again, are adverse childhood experiences. So not only students of low SES experience these. So a list accumulated through multiple sources of what ACEs could be are like witnessing substance abuse in the home, experiencing violence or a mental illness in the home, so having a family member with some sort of mental illness, suffering from psychological and emotional abuse or neglect, seeing physical violence from a parent or adult in the home, economic hardships, divorce or the death of a parent, as well as a parent having to spend time in jail. These are all things that would affect your student, or affect our students, affect your students, whoever's students, affect the students, and the youth of our nation. And these will have effects on these students' abilities to focus in school, on their abilities to do well in school. And these are things that you're not going to see when your student walks into your classroom. These are things that they're going to have buried inside of them. And if you're lucky, maybe they'll talk to you about it. But it's more likely than not, these are things that they're going to silently struggle with. So let's talk about these ACEs. So according to childtrends.org, Adverse Childhood Experiences, in 2006, 54% of our students did not experience these, which is wonderful. We want our students to have a happy little home life. But 11% experienced 3 or more of these throughout their youth. So that's really hard to have a student who has to experience multiple of these experiences. And poor children or near poor children are twice as likely to have 3 or more of these ACEs in their childhood. So this is something you want to keep in mind, because and I'm not saying, so disclaimer, socioeconomic status does not create ACEs. It's not because you're poor or because you had a poor home life. Socioeconomic status is not causation. It's just a trend. If you come from a lower socioeconomic status, you are more likely to have ACEs in the home. According to an education researcher, Eric Jensen, he wrote the book Teaching with Poverty in Mind. Quote, children raised in poor households often fail to learn healthy, appropriate responses to everyday situations. So this means that your students from a lower SES are more likely to give up or act out when the class starts getting hard. So if they come up against a problem that's frustrating and they can't figure it out, they're not going to have the appropriate behaviors in their mind set in place taught to them to know how to respond. So rather than appropriately dealing with this frustration, they're going to lash out. They're going to shut down. They're going to just throw their hands up and say, I'm done. And so you want to make sure that when you're dealing with these students, you're aware that lower SES students may act up more, and they may be more impatient as well as more impulsive. And so these are the students you're going to have in your classroom, and you want to make sure that you know how to deal with them. So just keep in mind that not every student who is SES is ACE. However, you can have those students in your classroom. And like I mentioned before with me, I came from a middle-class family. Lower middle-class family. Like, we weren't broke. We had some money. However, I am one of the students who experienced 3 or more of the ACEs in my childhood. And so I was a student who had A's and B's. I had never got even a C in my entire school experience. Actually, I got 1 C in my entire high school experience. 1 C. But I was struggling. I was fortunate enough that my family came from a higher level, and so I was taught those appropriate behaviors to deal with stress and to deal with when the going gets tough. But if I had come from a lower SES, if I didn't have a stay-at-home mother, I don't think I would have been able to survive. I would not have done as well in school if I did not have a stay-at-home parent to take care of me and to help me learn the proper way to deal with these stresses. And so when your student is struggling, maybe you need to try to be that person. Maybe you need to be the person to help them realize there's a way you can go about this. Rather than your child shutting down, your student shutting down, and you shutting down right back, take a minute, breathe, because they're probably working you up, and work on strategies to help them be the best student that they can be, that they can learn how to learn, because I'm sure no one has taught them. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.